Shalom, everyone. I know it's been a while since I've been online with my videos. Usually, I don't generally get on unless I really have something to say. And today, I have some things to say. It's been a few days now, almost a week, since Simchat Torah and the atrocities from Hamas on the Jewish people that took place on that day. There's no need, unless you've been living under a rock, there's no need for me to go into all the gory details of the horrific and terrible things that these savages did to our people, to our children, our babies, husbands, wives, daughters, sons, grandmas, grandpas. It's been gone over in great detail over the last 5 days, and there's no need for me to expand on that. What I do want to talk about, though, is the question everybody always asks when something tragic happens: how could God allow this kind of tragedy to take place, especially to his own people, his chosen people? It's a human question, and there's nothing wrong with asking it. Why these kinds of things happen, I'm not sure we will ever know for sure on this side of eternity. I mean, first of all, nothing like this has happened to our people since the days of the Holocaust and the pogroms in recent memory. Recent for people my age anyway. I mean, even my ancestors came out of the country they were living in as a result of the Spanish Inquisition. They had to flee Spain, made their way to the New World because of the atrocities committed by the Roman Catholic Church against our people back in the 1500s. But this went beyond the pale. And why? Why does God allow this to happen to us? Well, first of all, I want to say God's not to blame. The blame does not get pinned on Hashem. When we read in Bereshit or Genesis, after God created the universe, and then specifically this earth, this ball that's floating through space that is the only world any of us have ever known, he did something unique that he didn't do with any other creature that Hashem created. Once he was done and he created humanity, and because he created us in his image and likeness, not physically, of course, we don't look like God. God does not look like us. We have no idea what God looks like. Does God even have an appearance? We don't know. Never will. But God created within us his spark, his life, his eternity, his soul, if you will. The Spirit of God, the soul of God, is the soul of humanity. And with that comes certain responsibilities towards Hashem's creation itself, specifically the creation of this earth. Soon, once we start venturing out beyond our own planet, we will have the responsibility for whatever part of the universe we find ourselves in. Because God said to us, not just to one man and one woman, but to us and everyone in the loins of those people, of that first humans. He said, I am making you stewards, caretakers. I'm making you responsible for my creation. When you think about the depth of that, it really sits you back on your feet, back on your heels. We have the responsibility to carefully manage, sustain, prosper God's creation. That's a big responsibility, which means we also have a great responsibility to care for everything within God's creation. Plants, animals, rocks, oceans, everything living in the seas and oceans, everything flying through the air, and most importantly, to one another, our fellow human beings. Regardless of your religious status, it doesn't matter. When God created us, humanity, there was no religion. This has nothing whatsoever to do with religion, and everything to do with our responsibility, our caretaking of one another. So in this regard, when it comes to creation itself, the buck stops with God. The buck stops with Hashem. But when it comes to caretaking his creation, the buck stops with us. And we have not done a well job of taking care of one another. We've allowed division, religion, politics, self-interest to get in the way of that. And with that gets exacted a heavy toll on all of creation, and especially on one another. So how could God let this happen? God didn't let it happen. We did. We let it happen. Every time there's an atrocity on this planet, every time there's human-made disruption of the flow of Hashem's creation, that's our responsibility. We don't take care of one another the way Hashem intended for us to do. And that's on us, not Hashem. He's done his part. We haven't done ours very well. Now let's get back to what happened on Simchat Torah, on Shabbat last week. A group of Islamic jihadists known as Hamas came from Gaza, an area next to Israel in the southern part, next to the Mediterranean coast of the Mediterranean Sea, came out of that area and attacked innocent civilians, children, babies, husbands, wives, families. Sadly, I even saw a clip where one of the kibbutzim's family dog came running out because of all the noise, and a Hamas terrorist shot him dead. We've seen the bodies. We know the atrocity. Is this Israel's fault? Is this the fault of the Jews? If you believe some politicians, some radicals, jihadists, some that we have in the governments across the world, including Israel itself, in the Knesset, even within the United States, the most powerful country on the planet at this time, there are people in high offices applauding what took place last week. We will not applaud that. We will not applaud them. And you know who I'm talking about. Those within those positions of authority and power were granted to them by the people, their fellow human beings. And all I can say about that is if you support the kind of behavior, the kind of malicious, savage brutality that the Islamic jihadists in Hezbollah and Hamas, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, there's so many. If you support that, then you're no different than they are. And I urge those who put you in office, in particular in the case of the United States, the people within the districts of those people that are in offices and stations of power, remove them right away. Vote them out. Call for their resignation. Because if you don't, you are a party to their terrible, terrible, horrendous acts. By allowing them to remain in power, you're saying, hey, I agree with what they're saying. I agree with what happened in Israel on Simchat Torah, on the Shabbat. I agree with it. I agree with the beheading of babies. I agree with that. So we're going to keep you in office. If you don't support that, remove them immediately. Demand their resignation. And if they refuse to resign, throw them out of office in November when the U.S. has their, November of 2024, when the USA has their election process. Enough said on that. We are responsible for what happened. Not we individuals, but we as a humanity are responsible. Now, I will say I was a bit surprised, and I wasn't, at what took place. And why I wasn't surprised is I watch very closely what happens in my beloved generational homeland, Israel. I watch very closely what goes on over there. I've spent and lived in the Middle East, so I know the mindset. I lived in Islamic controlled countries, so as a Jew that was difficult, but I had work to do that had to be done. So I understand the mindset. And sadly, that mindset of lies, fabrications, begins with many of those people from the time that they learn to walk and learn to understand their language. It is ingrained in their children on a daily basis in schools and training camps. And the lie that they are told is that Israel is an occupier, that the Jews are occupiers of the land of Palestine, which Palestine never existed until the Romans changed the name of Israel when the Roman Empire was in charge of the world at that time, the Western world at least at that time. And they, as a slap into the face of every Jew living not only in the land but across the globe, they changed the name from Israel, the name of our beloved patriarch, to Palestine, which was the Roman equivalent to calling it Philistia, or the Philistine land. A group of people that ravaged that land thousands of years ago. And were just about like jihadists are today in their desire to rape, pillage, and plunder. But King David eliminated them, decimated them, and removed them from the face of the earth. And the land is called Israel, not Palestine. Before the late 1970s and 80s, there were no Palestinian people. They didn't exist. It's a fake name. There were Arabs, descendants of Ishmael, also a son of Abraham, a son of Abraham. The older brother, half-brother of Yitzhak, the son of Abraham and Sarah, the progenitor of the Jewish people. So there is no Palestinian land. There's only Israel. And Israel has apportioned a part of its land, boundaried out sections of its land to the Arab people living there who want to separate themselves from the Jews. Israel didn't have to do that. Israel to this day does not possess all the land that Hashem had promised Abraham through his son Yitzhak, Yaakov. He hasn't. We still haven't got all the land that was promised to us. I don't think we ever really had all the land that God promised to us, mostly out of our own inability to do what needed to be done to have that land and keep it. That's not on Hashem either. That's on us. We are responsible. We must get that through our heads. We are responsible. We as a people, we as a race of beings called humanity, we are responsible. We're responsible for not getting the land that God promised, all of it. We're responsible for not keeping it. We're responsible for losing it. We are responsible for regaining it. I know lots of people like to praise Hashem back in 1948 when we got our land back, parts of it. And I praise Hashem that that opportunity happened, but we had to take that opportunity. We had to take it. That's our responsibility, to do and take the promise that God gave us as a people. In 1948, when we declared our independence and set up the Free State of the nation of Israel, within days after that, Egypt, Syria, and a rabble of other Arabs attacked the brand new, it was just days old, land of Israel. We won because we were determined to keep this land that God promised us once and for all. Where were we going to go? It was just right after the Holocaust and the atrocities that took place there throughout Europe and other parts of the world, where people felt they had a free rein to try and destroy every Jew they could. We took it, and we were determined we're going to keep it. And when we took it, it was a barren wasteland. Nothing but dust and rocks. Nothing. Nothing really growing to speak of. It was a desolate desert wasteland. And in nearly 80 years, we've turned that desolate wasteland into a blooming garden. We did that. By the grace of Hashem, we did that. We are responsible. We're the stewards. And then in 1967, known as today as the 6-Day War, we have an opportunity to take the most precious piece of that land, Mount Moriah, and the top of Mount Moriah, which we know as the Temple Mount, where the Beit HaMikdash stood for over 700 years before it was conquered and destroyed by the Babylonians. And then again, from the time of our return from our exile, 70 years after being decimated, we went back and rebuilt that temple. And it remained there, even in the midst of all that took place, with conquerors trying to come in, some not successful, many were, because we could not hold on to it. That's on us, not Hashem. But we held on thanks to the Maccabean family, where we celebrate Hanukkah to this day in celebration of that great victory. And we held on to that until the days of the Roman Empire, when in 70 CE, they completely decimated the Temple Mount. You can still see the big, huge stones laying around the base of the wall that surrounds, that Herod built, that surrounds the Temple Mount. To this day, after 2,000 years, those big, massive stones that the Romans set on fire and threw down from the tops of the mount are still there. But we came back. 1948. We came back, declared our independence, and began rebuilding the land. But in 1967, when once again we were attacked by our Arab neighbors, all we want to do is live in peace on the land that was promised to us. The land was not promised to the Arabs. The only reason they want it is because it's ours. We don't want their land. We don't want Syria. We don't want Lebanon. We don't want Egypt. Hell, we don't even want the Sinai. We had it for a while, and we gave it back. We have no need for it. It was not in the promise. And we still haven't taken back some of the land that belongs to us, that was promised to us by Hashem through Abraham. We just want to live in peace. That's all. Raise our kids, make a living, just what everybody else in the world wants. Remember, Jews are human beings. We are human beings also. I know that there are those in the world who don't think we are. Now, there are some sick people who think that. Anyway, I digress. In 1967, we had an opportunity to regain the Temple Mount. Moshe Dayan, who was a military leader, led the troops. He could have taken it right then and there. He went as far as the Western Wall and stopped. I'm sure he had his reasons. He was not a particularly religious Jew. That could have been one of the reasons. He didn't think the significance, I suppose. I don't know. I don't know what was in Moshe's mind. All I know is he didn't do the job. He didn't do the job that Hashem had appointed him for. He was a good man, but he could have been a great man had he fulfilled Hashem's promise, but he did not. And he left the Temple Mount in the hands of the Arabs, to which it is to this day in their hands. They control it. May Hashem change that soon. Through us, not going to be a bolt of lightning come down from heaven to strike the Dome of the Rock or the Al-Aqsa Mosque. It's not going to happen. It'd be nice if Hamas could send a couple of their rockets over and it misses their target and hits the dome in Al-Aqsa. That would be nice. Then that's on them. But I don't foresee that happening either. That's our land, therefore it's our responsibility. But there's politically weak-minded people. And I love Bibi Netanyahu, but in some areas he's also politically weak-minded. He's afraid of I'm not blaming just Bibi, every prime minister before him, going all the way back to David Ben Gurion. Same thing. I don't know what the point is. What are they afraid of? They're afraid of a great Arab revolt? Hell, hasn't that been happening all along anyway? Has it not? Afraid what the rest of the world's going to think about Israel? Come on. I don't think it. Have you ever been to the UN? Have you ever sat in on one of their sessions when it comes to Israel? Please. Why should we worry? Why should we Jews and we Israelis, why should we worry about what the rest of the world thinks of us when all we're doing is reclaiming that which has been ours for 4,000 years? Why? Why do we care? Afraid we're going to cut off our funds? The most industrious, hardworking, scientific, intelligent people on this planet live in Israel, the Jews. Most of the wonderful inventions that we have that make us a great, growing society of human beings come straight out of the mind of a Jew. So I don't want to hear that crap. We cannot be concerned with what the rest of the world thinks about us, because they're never going to think well of us. We need to do what needs to be done, get the job done, and reclaim that which is ours once and for all. Enough is enough. You know, we had something we said after the Holocaust. We Jews, we said never again. Well, on a scale, what happened in one day last week on Shabbat surpassed just one day of the Holocaust in the number of deaths and atrocities. So it did again. If we mean never again, we better mean never, ever again. You know, I'm almost 75 years old. I was the generation born just a couple years after the end of World War II, at the end of the Holocaust era. So it's very, very, very close to my heart. I know what the Jewish families that came out of that went through. You can feel it in our blood. When we said never again, I'm saying we better mean it this time. Never, ever, ever again. I'm going to send a message to Bibi. He's not going to see it, I'm sure. Mr. Prime Minister, I've always respected you. I think you're one of the best prime ministers the nation of Israel has ever experienced. That's why you've held the post for a total of 16 years, not concurrently, but for 16 years. As much as we like to hear on the news, and especially in the Western world, how much the Jewish people don't like Bibi, well, they sure keep electing you, don't they? So there's something about you they like, and I can tell you what it is. You used to be really determined. You need to regain that again. I'm going to give you some advice. I'm not a prophet, but I'm going to give you the advice of a prophet. A similar situation took place when we had our very first Melech, king in Israel. His name was Shaul. And he was battling the enemy of that day, who was trying to destroy all the Jews. And there were a lot fewer of us then than there are now. And there aren't a lot of us now when you compare it to the rest of the world's population and the nations of the world. There's only 9 million of us in Israel. There's only about 5 or 6 million of us, 7 tops, in the United States. And there might be another 2 to 3 million scattered around the rest of the world. So 20 million maybe, that's all that's left. And if you count the number of us Jews that were slaughtered during the Holocaust, 6 million, when you think of the offspring they would have had, we could have been in the hundreds of millions by now, but we're not. There's only around 20 million of us worldwide, only 9 million in our beloved land. It's your job and our job, Mr. Prime Minister, to ensure that 20 million and the 9 million in your sphere of influence never again go through what we went through on Simchat Torah this year. So I'm going to give you the advice that a well-known prophet, my namesake, Shmuel, gave to Melech Shaul when he came up against the radically extremist terror Amalekites in his day. Shaul had conquered them, and Shmuel came to him with a message from Hashem. Whether it was or not is unimportant. What's important is we're responsible. And Shmuel gave, or Samuel, the English name, gave Melech Shaul these instructions. Kill every man, woman, child, livestock, tear down every building, turn it into dust. Shaul never listened. He spared the best livestock. He spared the king of the Amalekites, certain of its women, probably even some of the children. And when Shmuel came and saw what happened, that Shaul did not do what needed to be done to ensure the safety of the people that Hashem had appointed Shaul to protect, his own people, the Jews, Shmuel told him, you've lost your kingship. You're not responsible enough. You put this over your own people. You put what you were worried about, what the rest of the world might think about you if you had done what I told you to do. Therefore, you put your people second to them. You put your people second to the life of this king because you're worried about if you kill this king, then somebody who comes in and attacks you later may kill you. You put your selfish desires and your own fears ahead of your people. Shmuel ordered the troops to destroy the remaining livestock, the remaining Amalekites that were alive. And then Shmuel himself went up to the king of the Amalekites, took his sword, and slay him, ending the lives of every Amalekite and they were no longer a problem. That was one less enemy at the doorstep of the Jewish people. I know it sounds hard, especially in our days of sensitivity, but if you're going to have war, and people talk about, well, there's certain laws for engagement in war. When there's only 9 million of you, and you're surrounded by enemy on every quarter, then you don't give that enemy any quarter. You stand your ground and you destroy them wherever they are found. And in this case now it's Hamas. And don't tell me about the innocents in Gaza that are being destroyed now by Israeli bombing and soon to be destroyed when Israel makes its land strategy, invasion, if you want to call it that. It's not an invasion. It's a cleaning up the operation. Get upset all you want that Israel has turned off the electricity, the water, the gas, all power to Gaza. Cut off all food shipments to Gaza. I don't want to hear any sob stories about, oh, the innocent children in Gaza are going to starve. That's on Hamas's hands. The blood of those people are on the hands of Hamas, not Israel, not the Jews. This is war. And if you're going to win a war, you decimate, you destroy, you annihilate, you remove, you eliminate the enemy. In World War II, before we bombed, when I say we, I'm talking about the United States. When the United States bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki, days before they bombed, and right up almost to the minute they bombed, they flew over and threw leaflets out to let everybody know, get the hell out of town. We're going to destroy it. They didn't. Maybe some did, but most didn't. And we dropped the atomic bomb on both those cities. Innocent women and children were destroyed. That's called war, people. If you're going to win wars to spare your own people, then you've got to do what it takes to do that. When it comes to Hamas and Gaza, there have been several incursions over the years from them. Nothing like what happened this past week. This was historical. Some people are saying that this was Israel's 9/11. I don't think so. Because on 9/11, in the United States of America, when those two towers came down because of those Arab terrorists, Al-Qaeda, flying those planes into it, the fate of a nation, the fate of an entire people, 340 million of them, was not in their hands. Yes, it was terrible. 3,000 people were lost. Those people that flew over Pennsylvania and the plane crashed, thank God, because of heroes, because it was heading to the White House, we understand, or the Capitol building. Sadly, the people in the Pentagon that were hit. But that did not indicate that the fate of the entire nation of the United States of America was in jeopardy. What happened this weekend in Israel, we're only talking 9 million people, not 340, scattered over a large landmass. We're talking about 9 million people that are living in an area that's the size of New Jersey, one of our smaller states in the United States. So yes, the fate of Israel, the fate of the Jewish people was at stake with what happened this weekend. If we do not address it, if we do not eliminate the enemy, all of them, future enemies that will be bred from them, then it will simply happen again, probably at a much larger scale. So yes, there are no innocents. I'm sorry. I know that upsets a lot of people because we are progressively and we are sensitive. It hurts our sensitivities. It's a whole. That's because we in the Western world, and I speak now mostly to people living in the United States, other than 9/11, which was very localized in New York City and in Washington, D.C., was a small scale compared to what took place in Israel. I'm hoping that the United States doesn't have to face that with their open border down in the south and their open border up in the north, and God only knows what's coming across those borders. I'm hoping that the people of the United States do not have to begin knowing what we Jews that are living in Israel are experiencing on an almost daily basis on different levels. But this was, like I said, it went beyond the pale. You don't behead babies. You don't rip fetuses out of a mother's womb and leave it laying there on the street for the animals to eat. You don't do that. Even Jews won't be doing that. Here's what we will be doing. We're going to be carpet bombing the hell out of Gaza. We're going to starve them out. We're going to thirst them out. We're going to leave them in the darkness at night. That's war. Once and for all, Bibi, here's my advice. Do what Shmuel, my name's Shmuel too. I'm no prophet, but I'm speaking his words to you. Destroy every man, woman, and child, every piece of livestock, every building, tear it down, destroy it. Leave Gaza in a pile of dust. When it's over, take that pile of dust, move it with hundreds of bulldozers, push it into the Mediterranean Sea. I know that's really hard for some people to hear. But if you're going to win a war, you got to win a war. You don't win by leaving your enemy room to come back at you later. You know, I want to continue with what I was talking about earlier in World War II, when the United States bombed the hell out of Berlin. They dropped pamphlets first to let everybody know, get the hell out of Berlin. We're going to level it. Most people didn't. So a lot of innocents died that day. But it brought Germany to its knees. It resulted in the death of that monster, Adolf Hitler. And those monsters that he surrounded himself with. And Germany is far better for it today. That whole concept, that whole mindset that they had back then has been removed from the German people. Thank Hashem for that. That's what it takes. What we have, however, with Hamas is a mindset that even, I think, goes beyond Adolf Hitler. I really do. Why? As far as I know, maybe Mengele did, Dr. Mengele did, but as far as I know, Adolf Hitler never ripped babies out of their mother's wombs, never beheaded babies. Oh, they did atrocious things. We know all the stories of the Holocaust, and they're all true. There's very few of them still alive that survived that. Some were even taken by Hamas. Can you imagine that? To go through the Holocaust when you were a child, or the pogroms in Eastern Europe when you were a child, or the desecration of your lives by Stalin in Russia, to have escaped from that, and now you're old, you're in your 90s, maybe even 100s, and you're being dragged from your home again? No. No more. Enough is enough. Never again. Bibi, Mr. Prime Minister, Melech Shaul did not take Shmuel's advice. I'm asking you to take this Shmuel's advice. Level Gaza. Leave nothing alive or standing. I know this has not been a joyful video. These are not joyful times. But I'm asking that you support Israel any way you can. Support the Jewish people wherever they may be found. We're small in number, but mighty in our resolve. Never, ever again. Until next time, shalom.